Hello, and welcome to another episode of Dreamy History. This evening, we invite you to slow down, breathe deeply, and settle in for a journey into the quiet, overlooked corners of the past. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable. Dim the lights, pull your blanket gently up to your chest, and allow the rhythm of your breath to match the calm pace of this moment. If thoughts of the day still linger, imagine them floating away like old memos drifting down a hallway in red, unimportant and gone. Tonight, we explore a surprisingly soothing topic: the development of filing systems in 20th century offices. A history not of kings or battles, but of cabinets, folders, and the gentle evolution of paper organization. Let your mind wander as we turn the pages of memory, one drawer at a time. The filing clerk arrives each morning 15 minutes before the official start of her workday. It is not mandated in any employee manual, nor is it requested by her supervisor. Yet she does it every day. It is her routine. The air outside is cool, often damp with the dew that settles quietly overnight on the sidewalks and stone ledges. The city moves slowly at that hour. Streetcars rattle on their rails with a measured, predictable pace. Newspaper boys shout headlines into the morning mist, but even their voices seem slightly muffled, restrained by the weight of the early hour. She enters the building with a firm grip on her leather satchel, the kind worn by many office workers of the time. Inside, the corridor is long and narrow, paneled in a dull, light oak veneer that was installed 2 fiscal years ago to replace the chipped green paint that had graced the walls since the mid-1920s. The scent is faintly musty, with notes of floor polish, coal dust from the old furnace system, and aging paper, a mix that is both unpleasant and oddly comforting to those accustomed to it. Her footsteps echo quietly on the linoleum flooring, which was waxed the previous Friday by the janitor, whose handwritten name tag reads, "Only Mr. Lang." She reaches the filing room, a modest space containing 4 rows of vertical cabinets, 1 wide desk, and a small window, always kept slightly ajar. She removes her coat, folding it carefully over the back of the chair. She removes her gloves first, the left, then the right hand, sets them atop the cabinet, marked 1932, personnel. She checks the wall clock, which ticks evenly, a relic from the War Department's surplus auction of 1919. It reads 7:46 a.m. She unlocks the drawer, marked 7A, turning the key slowly, so as not to disturb the paper within. Everything begins, as it always does, in silence. Once she has unlocked the drawer and removed her gloves, the clerk sits quietly at her desk. The surface of the desk is made of well-varnished pine, slightly nicked at the edges, with a blotter pad in faded green that has not been replaced since the fiscal quarter of spring 1931. On the top left corner sits the Intrea standard wire mesh frame, approximately 11.5 inches by 8.5 inches in dimension, issued by Central Purchasing under Catalog Item 1204B. Inside the tray, the papers wait, dozens of them, memos printed on onion skin paper with faint purple carbon impressions, invoices typed on thick cotton stock, interdepartmental communications typed single-spaced with margins precisely set to 1 inch on all sides. She does not rush. She lifts each paper with the same deliberate care. She reads the subject line, compares it to her master list, then sets the document aside in a stack organized by department: purchasing, payroll, external contracts, internal notices. Each has a color-coded folder, though the colors have faded, and in some cases, the difference between pale yellow and light beige is no longer distinguishable to the untrained eye. As she sorts, the rhythm is constant. Pick up, read, sort, place. Pick up, read, sort, place. There is no variation. The forms are largely the same. Each memo begins with the date, always typed in the upper right corner, in the format October 4th, 1933. Each form ends with initials, typed in capital letters, left aligned beneath the final paragraph. Sometimes she pauses to realign a stack or to sharpen her pencil using a hand-cranked sharpener mounted on the edge of her desk. The room remains quiet. The light from the window shifts slightly as the sun rises. She continues, uninterrupted, until the tray is empty and her stack of manila folders sits at precisely a 90-degree angle to the edge of her desk. After the in-tray has been cleared, the next task is one of labeling. This step, though mechanical, is not without its small demands. The office utilizes a system of staggered folder, tabs left, center, and right. Each tab holds a white adhesive label on which the identifying code or title is typed in all capital letters. The machine she uses to create the labels is a Dyma-style punch labeler, an early model that imprints characters into a strip of stiff white tape. It operates manually. She holds it with both hands. The left hand stabilizes, while the right hand rotates the letter wheel and presses downward with steady force. The sound it makes is soft and methodical. CHH-CHK ... CHH-CHK ... Click. Today's labels include 194B, vendor contracts, 1933C, internal purchases, and staff notices Q3. These are standard classifications, assigned by administrative memorandum during the winter of 1930, and reaffirmed by the office supervisor in March of 1932. She affixes each label to the designated folder tab, ensuring it is centered horizontally and vertically. Misalignment is discouraged. In previous months, 2 clerks were quietly reassigned for repeated errors in tab placement. Once labeled, she aligns the folders in staggered order. No 2 adjacent folders should have tabs in the same position. The alternating sequence ensures that each label remains visible when the folders are placed upright in the drawer. It is a small detail, but in this office, small details are sacred. By the end of the task, her hands are slightly stiff. The punch labeler requires a surprising amount of force. She pauses, flexes her fingers, and returns the tool to its drawer. It rests on a felt cloth, alongside 2 replacement ink ribbons and a bottle of label adhesive. She closes the drawer softly, another round of labeling complete. At approximately 10:15 a.m., the predictable silence is broken gently, as always, by the arrival of Mr. Wexley, the office supervisor. He walks with measured steps, his shoes producing a hollow tapping against the linoleum floor. He wears a dark wool suit, 3 seasons out of date, with a silver tie pin shaped like a fountain pen. He carries a clipboard. He always carries a clipboard. He does not knock, but pauses in the doorway before speaking. "Miss Langdon," he says, "I require the personnel file for Thomas D. Weller, hired spring of 1929. She nods. She has filed that name before. She knows where it is. She rises not quickly, but with a kind of reserved efficiency. Her chair creaks faintly as she stands. They walk together to the rear cabinet, the one marked Personnel 1927 to 1931. It is tall, metal, and olive green. Each drawer is locked with a brass mechanism that sticks slightly when turned. She selects the appropriate key from a ring labeled with small brass tags, each one engraved with Roman numerals. The correct key is 7. The drawer slides open with a soft scraping sound. She flips through the folders. The tabs pass beneath her fingers. Watkins, ... Welby, Welch, ... Weller. She removes the file, which is 3/4 of an inch thick and secured with a 2-prong fastener at the top. The cover is marked in faded black ink. Weller, Thomas D. Start date, 04/29. She hands the file to Mr. Wexley, who nods without further comment. They exchange no other words. She returns to her desk. He walks away, clipboard in hand, footsteps fading. At 11:07 a.m., while preparing a folder for the outgoing drawer, labeled Contracts 1932 to 1933, she notices something that should not be there. It is an invoice typewritten on beige stock with 3 punched holes and a date in the upper right corner. June 8, 1932. The header reads, Client Invoice, number 11,427. This is not a contract. It does not belong here. She holds the page between her fingers, inspecting it closely. The classification stamp, issued from the office rubber stamper, is marked with the wrong code, CTR, instead of INV. This misfiling most likely occurred during a busy filing session in the previous quarter. She makes a mental note of the likely culprit, an assistant named Jeremy, who is known for filing quickly, though not always accurately. She retrieves the invoices minus 1932 folder from a separate cabinet, carefully removes the brass prongs, inserts the misfiled document in correct chronological order, refixes the fastener, and returns both folders to their respective places. The entire process takes 6 minutes. No report will be filed about the misfile. It is not a serious offense, but it is a breach of order. In this office, even the smallest deviation is corrected silently and with precision. There is no need for reprimand. The rhythm resumes. By mid-afternoon, the office atmosphere undergoes a subtle change. The phones, which rang sporadically throughout the morning, now remain silent. Typewriters clack more slowly. Conversations, never loud to begin with, fade almost entirely. The air grows warm and still. The sun, having climbed high into the sky, now begins its gradual descent, casting long diagonal shadows across the room through the Venetian blinds. She places a cup of weak tea, 2 parts water, 1 part milk on the right corner of her desk. It rests on a small coaster bearing the company's faded logo. As she sips, she gazes out the small window. The view is of the adjacent building's brick wall, stained with age and soot. A pigeon sits on the sill. It does not move. She does not attempt new tasks during this hour. Instead, she reviews what has already been done. She flips through folders she has labeled, adjusts the spacing of those in the drawer, and makes minute changes barely perceptible to anyone but herself. The pencil jar is moved 1 inch to the left. A folder labeled Staff Travel minus 1931 is replaced with a slightly newer copy. This is not inefficiency, it is absorption. The act of filing becomes not a duty, but a form of meditation. Time slows. The outside world recedes. As the clock nears 5 p.m., the day draws to its end. There are no bells or alarms. The only indication is the slow shifting of light and the quiet ticking of the clock mounted above the door. She begins her final routine. First, she collects all papers that remain in the out tray and places them in the to be filed tomorrow folder. This folder is stored on the far right of the desk. in a drawer marked Daily Carryover. It is lined with wax paper to prevent moisture. Each sheet is gently flattened, corners aligned, and stacked precisely. Next, she pushes each drawer of the filing cabinets closed. She does this with both hands, applying even pressure. Some drawers resist and must be nudged. Others close too quickly, and she catches them just before they slam. Each cabinet is then locked with its assigned brass key. The keyring, consisting of 15 labeled keys, is stored in a fireproof box, which is then placed inside a lower drawer of the supervisor's desk. She gathers her gloves. She retrieves her coat. She adjusts her collar in the mirror, which hangs just to the left of the office door. She checks her reflection, though she does not linger. Then she turns off the desk lamp with a soft click, opens the door, and steps into the corridor. The day is over. The files are safe. The system is intact. Edwin Granberry Sibbles was born in the city of Columbia, South Carolina, in the year 1866, shortly after the end of the American Civil War. Columbia at that time was undergoing slow, deliberate reconstruction. The streets were lined with brick buildings, many of which still bore the scorch marks of General Sherman's march. Edwin's family lived in a modest home above their cotton exporting office, an environment thick with the presence of documents. Documents in every room, ledgers in stacks, receipts rolled and bound, bills of lading with copperplate handwriting, sealed in wax and folded into thirds. His father, a methodical businessman, relied on paper for everything: transactions, correspondence, inventory. There were no typewriters in the early days. Everything was copied by hand, and Edwin, as a boy, watched as the clerks transcribed shipments and quantities into ledgers bound in dark blue cloth. The pages were thick, the ink iron gall, prone to fading if not properly stored. The elder Sibbles insisted on precision. Each entry in the ledger was to be no less than 3 lines apart. Each category of information was to be boxed with a ruled pencil line. Errors were not erased, but ruled through with a red pen and marked void. Edwin did not yet know what filing would mean to his future, but the influence of this environment was subtle and enduring. Paper became his first language. He came to understand the smell of ink, the texture of aged pulp, the quiet dignity of records, preserved not for excitement, but for reference. This quiet world of documentation shaped his thinking, wordlessly, patiently, one page at a time. In the early 1890s, having completed his education at South Carolina College, now known as the University of South Carolina, Edwin returned to the family's cotton business full-time. The office had changed only slightly. Typewriters had begun to appear, Remington models with clunky keys and ribbon cartridges that required frequent re-inking. Carbon paper was introduced for duplication. Yet the filing systems remained primitive. Documents were laid flat in pigeonhole compartments. These were wooden cubbies, similar to those seen in old post offices, with slots for correspondence. There were no standardized folders, no classification system. Each clerk developed his own structure, some grouped by date, others by subject, others by client. The result was slow retrieval, frequent duplication, and a considerable amount of time spent looking for things that had already been filed. Edwin noticed these inefficiencies. At first, he said nothing. He observed how documents warped when stacked horizontally, how the bottom layers yellowed from pressure, how important records became creased at the corners, worn by repeated searches. The pigeonholes, though numerous, could not expand. Once a slot was full, a new shelf was created. Soon the office resembled a miniature library with loosely defined rules. Edwin spent long hours comparing receipts, invoices, and correspondence, trying to bring order where none existed. His notations, made with a mechanical pencil on ledger paper, began to form the first outlines of what would become a new idea. He did not yet call it vertical filing, but already his thoughts moved toward the upright. In 1898, after years of handling loose papers, soft-bound ledgers, and pigeonhole compartments, Edwin Sibbles proposed an idea so deceptively simple that many failed to grasp its significance. Store paper upright. Instead of stacking documents in horizontal layers or binding them in volumes, why not insert each sheet into a manila folder and place it vertically in a box or cabinet, spine up, like books on a shelf? The concept emerged gradually. Edwin had experimented with cardboard boxes, at first basic containers, divided by alphabetical inserts. He noted how easy it was to scan through labels placed at the top edge of each document. His prototype system used folders cut from stiff paper stock, reinforced at the fold, with a handwritten subject line on the top edge. He formalized his concept in a short paper, written in unembellished prose, and submitted to the U.S. Patent Office. His invention was titled Indexing and Filing Apparatus, and although it may sound technical, the design relied on no moving parts. There were no gears, no levers, just gravity, friction, and paper. The genius of vertical filing was in its efficiency. Documents could be added or removed without reshuffling the entire pile. Folders could be color-coded, tabbed, cross-referenced. The file boxes, eventually drawers, could be expanded, labeled, and locked. The concept reduced storage space, retrieval time, and misfiling. It was the beginning of what would become the century's dominant filing method, used in banks, law firms, universities, and government offices across the United States. But at the time, it was merely an idea. One more suggestion in a quiet office. The early vertical filing systems were rudimentary. They were not yet the metal cabinets seen in post-war offices. The first models, based on Sibbel's specifications, were constructed from wood, mostly oak or walnut, crafted by local carpenters according to precise measurements. Each cabinet was approximately 50 inches in height, with 4 pull-out drawers, each 12 inches wide and 10 inches deep. The drawers were mounted on wooden slides, which produced a soft scraping sound when opened. Folders were made of heavy manila stock, typically 11 inches by 8.5 inches, folded once to form a flap. These folders were not yet standardized. Some had tabs on the left, others on the right, many with no tab at all. Labeling was handwritten in pencil or pen-typed only later, when typewriters became common in general clerical use. Edwin personally oversaw the installation of the first filing systems in his own office. He instructed his staff to remove all existing pigeonhole storage and replace it with upright drawers. At first, the transition caused confusion. Clerks accustomed to flat filing had to be retrained. Labels had to be rewritten. Departments had to agree on classification codes. But the results were evident. Retrieval times dropped. Misfiling incidents decreased. Documents were easier to handle, less prone to damage. Within a year, 3 neighboring businesses had adopted similar systems. By the turn of the century, insurance offices in larger cities, Chicago, Philadelphia, and New York, began to inquire about the Sibbels method. The filing cabinet, once an untested concept, became furniture. Despite the utility and widespread adoption of his vertical filing system, Edwin Siebels did not achieve great fame, nor did he accrue substantial wealth from his invention. The patent he filed in 1898 was specific to a filing apparatus, but it did not contain the legal specificity or aggressive protections that would allow him to monopolize the design. In the early 20th century, office supply manufacturers such as Globe Wernick and Yellman and Irby began to produce filing cabinets based on similar principles. These manufacturers introduced metal construction, sliding mechanisms, and file rails. Their designs improved upon Siebels' original concept in physical form, but not in intellectual origin. Edwin did not sue. He did not protest. In interviews, which were few and brief, he referred to himself modestly as a businessman, not an inventor. His name appeared in trade publications on occasion, usually in the form of a footnote. An article in the Office Economist, dated June 1904, credited a Southern cotton executive with the origins of vertical filing, but did not name him directly. In Columbia, his own clerical staff referred to the system simply as Edwin's drawers. They used it daily, without comment. His contribution went largely unrecognized in public discourse. There were no awards, no appearances at industrial expositions, no honorary degrees. But in offices across the country, his idea worked, quietly, predictably, permanently. It was not a legacy carved in marble, but in folder tabs. For the remainder of his professional life, Edwin continued to work in his family's business. The firm shifted slightly in focus over the decades, from cotton exports to insurance and document storage consulting. But Edwin's daily life remained unchanged. He maintained a small, sparsely decorated office with a single window and a view of a brick wall. The office held 2 filing cabinets, a roll-top desk, and a wall calendar, always 1 month behind. He wore the same gray wool suit most days, with a pocket watch clipped to his vest. His shoes were polished weekly. His notes were handwritten in black ink on ruled pads of yellow legal paper. He kept a set of pencil stubs in a tin can, organized by sharpness. Visitors described him as polite but reserved. He preferred to listen rather than speak. When asked about his invention, he often changed the subject. Filing, he believed, was not a topic for discussion. It was a tool, one that worked best when invisible. He resisted modernization. Though electric typewriters became available in the 1930s, he continued using a manual Underwood, manufactured in 1922. He declined offers to digitize records, though he did approve the installation of a rotary phone. He died in 1954, quietly and without ceremony. His obituary, published in the local newspaper, made no mention of his invention. But in the records rooms of thousands of offices, from San Francisco to New York, drawers continued to slide open. Folders stood upright. He was gone, but the system remained. In the decades that followed Edwin Siebels' passing, filing systems evolved. Cabinets became taller, narrower, constructed from lighter materials. Tabs moved from the top to the side. Folders became color-coded, but the basic principal paper, filed vertically for easy access, remained unchanged. Modern office design manuals referenced vertical systems and drawer-based storage solutions, but rarely named him. The term Siebels' method was never popularized. He became, at best, a historical footnote in corporate training materials, mentioned in passing during onboarding presentations, if at all. In archival circles, some filing cabinets bore brass plaques from the 1910s. The manufacturers were credited. The patents were cited. But Edwin's contribution, quietly embedded in the daily routines of millions, went unspoken. In Colombia, his name appeared only in old tax rolls and business records. His personal papers were stored appropriately upright in a cardboard box housed in the basement of a university archive, catalogued under miscellaneous. But his legacy was not in fame, it was in function. Every time an employee retrieved a form without thumbing through an entire stack, every time a document was found because it had a tab, every time someone closed a drawer and walked away, his legacy endured, not loudly, but reliably. At the start of the 20th century, most office documents existed in a state of visual uniformity. Paper was white or off-white, produced from wood pulp, linen, or rag fiber, and cut into standardized dimensions of 8.5 by 11 inches. Ink was typically black, occasionally blue-black, and marginal notations, if made at all, were done in pencil or red pen. In this quiet, gray-toned world, color emerged, not as decoration, but as a navigational tool. Stationery suppliers, particularly in industrial hubs like Chicago and Philadelphia, began to experiment with lightly tinted paper stocks. These shades were not vibrant. They included pale pinks, soft greens, dusty yellows, and muted bluestones, designed not to call attention, but to gently differentiate. The logic behind these colors was rooted in usability. Filing clerks and typists spent long hours reviewing stacks of documents, and visual fatigue was common. The addition of subtle color allowed for quicker identification without strain. Blue might indicate correspondence, green, invoices, pink, personal memos. These assignments varied between offices, yet the principle remained constant. Catalogs from the period such as the 1912 National Office Supply Register listed paper by both weight and hue. The same memo could be printed on 6 different shades, depending on its destination. These catalogs included swatches pasted onto the pages for comparison, annotated with phrases like suitable for inter-office transfer or best used for temporary retention. Thus began the slow evolution from monochrome monotony to a carefully calibrated palette of administrative perpessivisual grammar of pastel shades designed not to impress, but to guide. By the 1920s, offices began developing internal color systems, primitive but methodical attempts to assign specific colors to specific types of information. These assignments were rarely standardized across industries, but rather emerged organically within individual departments, often led by a senior clerk or head administrator with a penchant for visual logic. For instance, one regional insurance company might use blue folders for policyholder information, red for claim forms, and yellow for premium notices. Meanwhile, a nearby legal firm might designate the same colors for case files, invoices, and pending litigation, respectively. There was no master key. Instead, each office maintained an internal legend, sometimes posted discreetly on the wall, outlining the color-toke category correspondence. Folders themselves were made of heavyweight cardstock, often reinforced with linen strips at the spine. These folders, sold in batches of 50 or 100, came with prefixed tabs, either blank or lightly ruled. Office staff would write the folder's designation by hand, using fountain pens with fine nibs or mechanical pencils fitted with 2B lead for durability. These early categorization efforts were both functional and symbolic. They suggested order. They implied readiness. A filing cabinet filled with staggered blue, red, and yellow folders presented a visual cue to visitors and auditors alike that the office maintained a certain standard regardless of what the folders actually contained. Color, in these early trials, became a silent marker of procedural commitment. Not absolute accuracy, not necessarily consistency, but a visible attempt at systematization, a quiet pledge to contain the growing tide of paper, one shade at a time. As color coding became more widespread, another dimension of filing began to develop: the placement of tabs along the top edge of folders. This detail, while seemingly minor, added a layer of visual organization that proved invaluable to those tasked with managing hundreds or thousands of documents daily. Initially, folders featured centered tabs, or no tab at all, but by the late 1920s, manufacturers began producing folders with staggered tab positions: left, center, and right. This tri-tab system was soon followed by 5-tab and even 7-tab variations, offering a greater range of indexing possibilities. Each tab position allowed for a distinct label to remain visible even when stacked in sequential order. Offices developed preferences. Some departments favored a left-to-right sequence that reset after every 5th file. Others alternated tabs, intentionally left, center, right, left, center based on internal logic. A left tab might indicate the beginning of a new category, a right tab, a subfolder. The system varied, often reflecting the habits of the person doing the filing more than any external rule. Tab labels were typed on adhesive strips or written in small block letters with blue ink. Smudged labels were replaced. Crooked ones were corrected. A misaligned tab was seen not only as a visual annoyance, but a procedural flaw. The eye could scan across tabs and locate the needed file in seconds, provided the sequence remained intact. Thus, tab placement became its own discipline and art form, rooted in repetition, best learned through practice and perfected through patience. By the mid-20th century, the humble color-coded folder evolved into a complete indexing system. Offices no longer used colors sporadically or intuitively. Instead, they developed entire visual systems composed of hues, tab placements, striping, and label typography. These systems were often codified in printed manuals distributed by office supply companies or internal clerical supervisors. One prominent example was the Bates color filing system, popular in hospital administration and adopted by educational institutions. It employed a 10-color scheme, with each color corresponding to a specific function. For example, pink represented student records, green denoted financial aid, orange signified disciplinary reports, and so on. Within each color category, files were further broken down by tab placement, subject label, and even font weight. Another model, used primarily by state government offices, assigned colors by quarter. Q1 documents received blue folders, Q2 documents received green, and so on. The fiscal year unfolded like a color wheel, repeating annually. To support these systems, supply companies manufactured accessories, colored index dividers, matching tab stickers, rainbow-coated paper clips, and drawer labels printed in complementary hues. File drawers themselves were often painted to match the dominant color of their contents, making entire filing rooms resemble carefully curated libraries of bureaucracy. This color indexing, far from frivolous, enabled clerks to identify, retrieve, and refile documents with remarkable efficiency. Over time, employees developed muscle memory associating not only a file's contents, but also its color, its tab position, and its location within a sequence of drawers, creating an internal map of the office's paperwork. Though initially adopted for purely organizational purposes, the use of color in filing systems gradually intersected with psychological insights. As early as the 1930s, studies in industrial management journals began to explore the effects of color on productivity, emotional well-being, and memory retention. Researchers observed that certain colors induced specific responses. Blue, for example, was found to promote calmness and concentration. It was soon recommended for use in high-volume, low-era departments, such as accounting or legal review. Red, conversely, stimulated alertness and urgency, making it appropriate for urgent memos, unpaid invoices, and pending litigation folders. Yellow, cheerful and energizing, was associated with creativity and optimism, and was often used for training materials, marketing proposals, and internal communications. Green, linked to balance and stability, became popular in human resources and compliance departments. This knowledge influenced not only file colors, but the broader design of clerical environments. Some companies repainted filing cabinets in tones aligned with their departmental themes. Others modified their lighting systems to better reflect colored tabs, reducing eye strain and improving retrieval speed. Over time, filing clerks internalized these associations. A blue folder did not need to be read. Its purpose was understood on sight. The presence of a red tab signaled immediate attention. Filing became not merely visual, but visceral. The eyes scanned, the hands moved, and the body responded. In this way, the psychology of color transformed the filing room into a silent dialogue between emotion, efficiency, and memory, carried out entirely in pastel tones and staggered labels. Despite the precision and care involved in color-coded filing, there remained a persistent truth. Order in the office was often an illusion. Even the most methodical system could conceal disorder just beneath the surface. A cabinet filled with evenly spaced, brightly colored folders gave the impression of structure. Each tab lined up, each label typed. Yet within those folders, contents might be mismatched, incomplete, or outdated. A green folder labeled Employee Records -1935 could easily contain forms from 1934 or 1936. A red folder marked Urgent Claims might house requests that had already been resolved or never followed up at all. Nevertheless, the appearance of order reassured. It reassured supervisors conducting walkthroughs. It reassured new hires during orientation. It reassured the clerks themselves, who could glance at a drawer and believe that things were, broadly speaking, under control. This phenomenon was not deception, it was maintenance, a psychological reinforcement of stability achieved through color and form. The repetition of labels, the alignment of tabs, the deliberate spacing of folders, even when new documents had yet to be filed. The illusion was not harmful. In fact, it was often beneficial. It provided a framework of visual rhythm that enabled real work to occur. Misfiles could be corrected, duplicates could be discarded, but the system remained intact in appearance, even when its contents strayed. In this way, color-coded filing served two masters, function and perception, and for most offices, perception was enough. As offices grew into institutions, and institutions grew into corporations, the filing system began to reflect not only the needs of information management, but also the identity of the organization itself. Branding reached the filing cabinet. By the 1960s, companies began to standardize not just logos and letterheads, but internal documentation systems. Color-coded folders were specified in corporate manuals. Finance departments used navy, legal used maroon, human resources used slate gray. These colors were chosen for consistency, formality, and alignment with brand values. The folders themselves were often embossed with company initials or slogans. Tab labels were formatted in the same font as the company's annual report. Even paperclips, staplers, and file box exteriors were ordered in matching hues. For external visitors, investors, government regulators, this consistency conveyed professionalism. For internal employees, it reinforced the corporate hierarchy. One could glance at a meeting table and know, from the color of the folder in front of a participant, their department, their function, even their likely talking points. Branding became embedded in every drawer. A client file wasn't just a collection of contracts, it was part of a visual identity system. A memo in the wrong color folder could be a breach of protocol. An unbranded label might prompt corrective action. Thus, filing, once a tool of convenience, became a language of affiliation, a quiet nod to the structure, status, and image of the company. Even in silence, the cabinets spoke. Occasionally, order gave way to confusion. Despite the best intentions, filing systems clashed testily during departmental mergers, personnel turnover, or office relocations. A newly hired clerk, trained in one color tab structure, would find herself sorting documents into an entirely foreign system. A red folder from legal might be mistaken for the finance color in another branch. A tab placed on the left edge instead of the center could disrupt the visual sequence of an entire drawer. And labels typed in 10-point Courier font might look inconsistent next to others typed in 12-point Pica. Mismatches multiplied. Entire filing rooms were reorganized, only to be undone by a new supervisor with a different filing philosophy. Some preferred chronological order. Others insisted on alphabetical. Still others introduced numerical classification, filing by form number, invoice ID, or project code. The result was rarely chaos, but often misalignment. A folder might be correctly labeled, but incorrectly placed. A drawer might be neat, but contextually irrelevant. The system functioned barely but with friction. Employees adapted. Notes were added to labels. Stickers were applied. Cheat sheets were taped inside cabinet doors. Over time, most systems stabilized, but never completely. In these quiet collisions, a kind of filing diplomacy emerged. Clerks negotiated standards, supervisors issued memoranda, cabinets were relabeled, folders replaced, and once again, the illusion of order returned. It was never perfect, but it was good enough to keep the paper moving. In the outer perimeter of the executive wing, separated by a corridor of low-footfall carpet and insulated walls, sits the private secretary's desk. The desk is large-knit, ostentatiously so, but substantial, built from walnut, polished weekly with lemon oil and buffed with a clean cotton cloth. It is placed at a deliberate angle facing the door, allowing the secretary to monitor the hallway and anticipate the approach of visitors, messengers, or other staff members. The surface of the desk is uncluttered by design. A Rolodex sits on the right, aligned precisely with the edge. A square blotter occupies the center, its leather corners tucked beneath the desk mat. An intercom rarely used is placed near the left elbow. The inbox and outbox trays, crafted from matching walnut veneer, are emptied and refilled daily. Each tray has a brass label holder etched with the words "Received" and "To be signed." These are not decorative, they are functional. The secretary's role is not filing in the traditional sense. She does not retrieve forms from metal drawers or handle time cards or invoices. She manages the flow of executive paper, correspondence addressed to the chairman, handwritten notes from board members, preliminary agreements drafted on embossed letterhead. Each item that crosses her desk is recorded, not entered into a filing system per se, but logged into a ledger bound in green leather with ruled columns and date fields. The act of logging takes place with a mechanical pencil, the graphite replaced weekly from a standard tin case. She does not speak unless spoken to. Her expressions are neutral. Her posture is straight. The desk is her domain, not for decoration, but for control. Paper enters, paper exits. The rhythm is uninterrupted. Inside the office proper, past the secretary's desk and through a door with a brass handle, the executive conducts dictation. The scene is a familiar one, repeated in dozens of offices across the country. A man in a tailored wool suit sits in a high-backed leather chair. On his desk rests a dictation machine, usually a wax cylinder model or magnetic tape recorder, depending on the year. He does not write. Writing is for clerks. He speaks, slowly, deliberately. He enunciates each word. He spells out difficult names. He pauses between sentences to allow for transcription timing. The secretary, seated on a smaller chair just beyond his line of sight, listens carefully. Later, she will return to her own desk and transcribe the audio using a typewriter, probably a Smith Corona or Underwood, keeping to the preferred formatting style: double-spaced, justified margins, block paragraphs, and official headers in 14-point type. Once typed, the letter is placed in a signature folder. This folder is black, leather-like in texture, and lined with thin felt. Inside are removable plastic sleeves, each containing one document. The executive signs each one with a fountain pen filled with black or blue-black ink. The pen is not shared. It is his pen, stored in a leather case and refilled only by his secretary. When signed, the documents are sorted again. Originals are filed in the administrative archive. Copies are sent to relevant departments. A third carbon, faint but legible, is retained for the executive's records. This entire ritual dictation, transcription, signature is repeated daily, often twice. It is not rushed. It is not questioned. It is the slow choreography of authority rendered in ink and paper. Once a month, or sometimes bi-weekly, depending on the institution, the board convenes. This meeting is not casual. It is scheduled months in advance. The location is always the same: a dedicated boardroom located near the top floor of the office. Building outfitted with a long table made of imported wood, a dozen or more leather chairs, and no less than 3 wall clocks set 2 different time zones. Before the meeting begins, the secretary delivers a series of packets. Each packet is identical. It contains the agenda, previous meeting minutes, departmental reports, financial summaries, proposed resolutions, and, if applicable, correspondence from outside entities such as investors or legal counsel. These packets are not stapled. They are collated with precision and housed in file folders of a uniform color, often a shade of navy blue or institutional gray. The labels are embossed in silver foil. The date of the meeting is printed in bold. Inside, the documents are ordered precisely. A table of contents is included. Each page is numbered. The executive participants open these folders in near silence. Pages are turned slowly, audibly, but gently. Notes are made in the margins, usually with mechanical pencils, sometimes with fountain pens. No highlighters are used. Annotations are minimal. Questions, if any, are saved until the discussion phase. At the meeting's conclusion, the packets are collected. Some are shredded. Others are archived. Nothing is left behind. Every document has its place either in the board archives, in the chairman's confidential file, or in the filing room vault. This is not just documentation, it is ritual. Every executive suite contains, or once contained, a locked filing room. This room is not large. It is rarely visited by anyone outside the executive staff or the most senior clerical assistants. It is secured with a physical key, often kept in a designated drawer, stored in a marked envelope, or worn discreetly on a chain by the executive's assistant. Inside, the filing room is dimly lit. The overhead light is fluorescent or incandescent, depending on when it was last upgraded. The walls are lined with metal filing cabinets, each painted in institutional colors: grays, beiges, perhaps army green. Some cabinets are labeled, others are deliberately blank. These cabinets do not contain daily memos or invoices. They hold originals, contracts signed by board members, confidential HR reports, regulatory audits, litigation folders, internal investigations. Some files are kept for legal compliance. Others are preserved out of habit. Still others remain only because no one knows whether they are allowed to be discarded. The atmosphere in the room is stale. The air smells faintly of carbon paper, adhesive, and time. Dust accumulates slowly in corners. Rubber bands dry out and crack. Manila folders lose their rigidity, yet the files endure. Each drawer opens with a slow resistance. Each file is filed upright, tab labeled in all caps, with a date range and department code. They are never overfilled. To overfill is to risk creasing or worse, misalignment. In the executive world, where reputation hinges on the past, the locked filing room is the final archive of memory. For high-ranking executives, filing is not merely record-keeping, it becomes legacy. Beyond financial reports or contractual documents, a separate category of materials emerges: personal correspondence, public speeches. These items do not fall under any departmental classification. Instead, they form what is often referred to informally as the chairman's portfolio. This portfolio is maintained by the executive's secretary. It is usually housed in a custom-made binder or accordion-style folder, sometimes leather-bound, with stitched edges and a monogram embossed on the flap. Inside are plastic sleeves or document protectors. The materials within are organized chronologically. Although some entries are grouped thematically: public engagements, charitable work, legislative testimony. Every 6 months, the portfolio is reviewed. Outdated materials are not removed, but repositioned. New articles from trade publications are inserted. Award certificates are copied and filed. The originals may be framed or returned to storage. The purpose of this file is unspoken. It is not used for daily operations. It is not referenced in meetings, but it remains available, ready for press kits, biographies, or, eventually, retirement announcements. This quiet file, hidden in a drawer or kept in a locked cabinet, contains the version of the executive that will be remembered. Not for errors, not for missed targets, but for speeches delivered, letters received, pictures taken. It is a curated identity printed on fine stock, filed under L4 legacy. Not all documents are meant to last. In the executive suite, disposal is as deliberate as creation. Documents slated for destruction are not thrown away. They are reviewed, they are classified, then they are removed. The process begins with identification. A memo marked for review is attached to a document flagged for disposal. The secretary examines the file, confirms its expiration date, usually based on retention policy, and submits a request to shred. This is done in triplicate, one for records, one for legal, one for archives. Once approved, the file is removed from its drawer and placed in a shredding envelope. These envelopes are heavy-duty, double-sealed, and labeled with the document destruction date. Some offices use shredding bins, others engage professional services, but in high-level suites, discretion is prioritized. The shredder itself is a mid-sized model, stored in a cabinet or utility closet. It is not used for bulk paper. It is reserved for documents containing personal, financial, or confidential information. It is operated manually feed, one sheet at a time, ensuring each page is properly destroyed. The shredding sound is soft but final. No one speaks during shredding. Once completed, the remains are collected, bagged, and marked confidential refuse. These bags are taken away not by janitorial staff, but by designated personnel. The bags are sealed, the contents unrecoverable. Disposal, like filing, is a ceremony, not abrupt, not careless, a gentle end to a document's life cycle. As the workday draws to a close, one final ritual remains: the out tray. It is a simple wooden box, lacquered, and set at the far end of the executive desk. Its purpose is singular: to hold the papers leaving the office. Throughout the day, signed letters, completed reports, and approved memos accumulate in small piles. These are reviewed by the secretary, one by one, for accuracy, signature verification, and document sequence. Only then are they placed in the out tray. Each envelope is addressed using the office's standard format: recipient's name, department, and internal mail code, typed on a cream-colored label, affixed with a glue stick that is never shared between departments. The envelopes rest in the tray like sealed thoughts. Some will travel to the mailroom, others to the next floor. A few will be hand-delivered. At 5:25 p.m., the secretary gathers them. She checks each one against the dispatch list, initials the corner, and places them in the out bin by the elevator. The elevator doors open slowly. The bin is wheeled in. The doors close. The tray, now empty, is wiped clean. The desk is straightened. The work is finished. By 6:15 p.m., the executive floor becomes still. The fluorescent lights hum softly overhead. The click of heels against the tile has ceased. The air conditioning cycles down. In the corner, a janitor pushes a mop silently down the hallway. The secretaries have left. The files are locked. The doors are closed. The windows, if they open at all, reveal a dim skyline, indistinct, distant. In the filing room, the drawers sleep, their contents undisturbed. Upstairs, a single desk lamp remains lit, casting a warm circle of light across an otherwise dark office. The out tray is empty. The inbox is covered with a cloth. The rhythm of the day is complete. Everything has returned to its place. Every folder is aligned. Every document accounted for. The paper has done its job, and so has the filing system. The development of filing systems may not stir the heart, but perhaps it soothes the mind. In an age before screens and cloud drives, order was built with drawers and folders, labels and tabs, a quiet world of rhythm and repetition, where every file had its place, and every day ended with the soft click of a cabinet door. As you drift now toward sleep, let that rhythm remain with you. Let the folders fall into place, let the cabinets close, and let the weight of the day fade quietly away. Good night from Dreamy History. We'll see you again in the past.